My name is Margaret Thompson, and I'm 62 years old. For the past 8 years since my husband passed away, I've been living what I thought was a quiet, peaceful life in our family home in the suburbs of Cleveland, Ohio. I used to be a nurse for 35 years, but I took early retirement when my husband got sick. Now, my days revolve around something I never expected at this stage of my life. Taking care of my 29-year-old son David and his fiancée Jessica, who've been living with me for the past 2 years. Every morning I wake up at 5 a.m., not because I have to, but because I want to. I want to make sure David has his coffee ready when he stumbles downstairs at 6:30, and that Jessica's favorite Greek yogurt with honey is set out on the counter just the way she likes it. The house smells like bacon and fresh biscuits by the time they wake up, and honestly, that makes me happy. It reminds me of when David was little, when making breakfast was about love, well, I'll get to that part later. Our house is a beautiful 3-bedroom colonial that my late husband Tom and I bought 30 years ago. We raised David here, watched him take his first steps on these hardwood floors, celebrated every birthday and Christmas in our spacious living room. The backyard still has the tire swing Tom hung from the old oak tree when David was 7. After Tom passed, I thought about downsizing, but David needed a place to stay while he got back on his feet, and then Jessica moved in, and suddenly the house felt full of life again. I spend my days maintaining this home like it's a 5-star hotel. I vacuum every other day, dust the furniture weekly, and keep the garden looking pristine. The neighbors always compliment me on my roses. Tom planted those for me on our 15th wedding anniversary. I handle all the household expenses, the $1,200 monthly utilities, $400 for groceries, $300 for household supplies. David contributes when he can, but working part-time at Henderson's Auto Repair only brings in about $28,000 a year, and Jessica's social media marketing job pays around $35,000. Together, they barely cover their car payments and personal expenses. What they don't know, what nobody really knows, is that I'm not struggling financially at all. Tom left me well taken care of. My 401k has $380,000. Our house is completely paid off and worth about $450,000, and I have $85,000 in savings. The house title, the bank accounts, the investment portfolios, everything is in my name only. Tom and I set it up that way years ago for tax purposes, and after he passed, I never saw a reason to change it. David has always been my gentle boy. Even as a child, he avoided conflict, preferred to keep the peace rather than rock the boat. He's got Tom's kind eyes and easy smile, but he also inherited Tom's tendency to let stronger personalities make decisions for him. I used to worry about that when he was growing up, but I thought marriage might give him the confidence to stand up for himself. I was wrong about that too. Jessica Martinez came into our lives 2.5 years ago, and at first, I was thrilled. She's beautiful, confident, and seemed to adore David. She has this way of lighting up a room when she walks in, with her perfectly styled blonde hair and designer clothes that somehow always look effortless. She works in social media marketing for a local boutique firm, and she's always talking about building brands and creating influence. David was completely smitten from day one. When they decided to move in together, it seemed natural for them to stay here. Just temporarily, Jessica assured me, with that bright smile of hers. We want to save up for our dream wedding and put money aside for our own place. The plan made sense. They'd save on rent, I'd have company, and we'd all help each other out. What could go wrong? At first, everything was wonderful. Jessica would curl up next to me on the couch and show me her Pinterest boards full of wedding ideas. She'd ask my opinion on flowers and venues, and I felt included, valued. David seemed happier than I'd seen him in years. The house felt alive again with their laughter echoing through the rooms. But somewhere around the 6-month mark, things started to shift. It was subtle at first, little comments that felt slightly off. Jessica would walk through the living room and wrinkle her nose slightly. "This furniture is so vintage," she'd say. Not unkindly, but not exactly warmly either. Have you ever thought about updating the decor, Margaret? Something more modern might really open up the space. Then came the suggestions about my lifestyle. You know, Margaret, most women your age are really embracing their independence. My friend's mom just moved into this amazing retirement community in Florida. She says it's like being at a resort every day. Activities, new friends, no household maintenance to worry about. She'd say this while scrolling through her phone, not even looking at me, like she was just thinking out loud. The wedding planning gradually became something I was less and less involved in. When I'd ask about the guest list or offer to help with arrangements, Jessica would give me that patient smile and say, "Oh, don't worry about it, Margaret. David and I have it handled. We want this to be our day, you know, something that really represents us as a couple." David started backing her up on everything. When I suggested we use my grandmother's china for the reception, David just shrugged and said, "Jess has her heart set on those modern white plates, Mom. It's her day." When I offered to contribute more financially beyond the $28,500 I'd already given them, Jessica would smile and say, "That's so generous, but we want to do this ourselves." Well, mostly ourselves. Adi. The most unsettling changes happened in the past few months. Jessica started asking questions about my finances that felt too personal, too probing. "Margaret, have you thought about updating your will? I mean, at your age, it's important to have everything organized, right? David and I were talking, and we think you might want to consider simplifying your assets while you're still able to make those decisions clearly." She'd bring up stories about other older people in the neighborhood. "Did you hear about Mrs. Peterson down the street? Her kids moved her into assisted living last month. She's actually much happier there. No more worrying about maintaining that big house all by herself." These comments always came with concerned looks and gentle touches on my arm, like she was worried about me. But it was the way she and David had started talking to each other that really set off alarm bells in my head. I'd catch them in quiet conversations that would stop abruptly when I entered the room. David would look guilty, and Jessica would immediately brighten and change the subject to something cheerful and meaningless. Last month, I overheard Jessica on the phone with someone. I assume a friend, saying, I know, it's taking longer than we thought. But David's finally starting to see that this situation isn't sustainable long term. I mean, we're practically 30 years old living with his mother. It's not exactly the life we envisioned, you know? 2 weeks ago, I found a notebook that Jessica had left on the kitchen counter. The cover said, "Our future plans," in her neat handwriting. I know I shouldn't have looked, but something compelled me to flip it open. Inside were sketches of room layouts, paint color swatches, and furniture arrangements. But these weren't plans for a new house they were hoping to buy. These were renovation plans for my house. Our bedroom, mine and Tom's for 30 years, was labeled Master Suite D&J. The guest room was marked Office Craft Room, and my sewing room, where I keep all my quilting supplies and photo albums, was labeled Nursery Future. My hand shook as I flipped through page after page of plans for my home, plans that didn't seem to include me anywhere. There was a small notation on the last page that made my blood run cold. Talk to M about downsizing timeline. Maybe suggest FL retirement communities? Research costs and availability. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. Were they planning to push me out of my own home? Had David really agreed to this? The boy I'd raised, who used to crawl into bed with me during thunderstorms, who still called me Mama when he thought no one was listening, was he really plotting to get rid of me? The next morning, I watched them at breakfast with new eyes. The way Jessica touched David's hand when she talked about our future. The way David avoided eye contact with me when Jessica mentioned making some big changes after the wedding. The way they both seemed to have a shared secret that I wasn't part of. I started paying closer attention to their conversations, and what I heard broke my heart. Jessica would make comments like, "When we have our own space," and "once we can really make this place ours." And David would nod along like he understood exactly what she meant. They weren't talking about moving out. They were talking about me moving out. The wedding was now just days away, and instead of feeling excited about celebrating my son's happiness, I felt like I was watching my life being planned away by two people who were supposed to love me. The worst part was how normal everything seemed on the surface. Jessica still smiled at me every morning. David still hugged me goodnight. But underneath, I could feel the current of change, pulling everything I'd built towards something I didn't recognize. I began to realize that Jessica's comments about retirement communities and independence weren't suggestions. They were warnings. She was letting me know, as gently as possible, that my time in this house was coming to an end. And David, my sweet conflict-avoiding David, was going along with it because it was easier than standing up to the woman he loved. As I sat in my kitchen that Thursday night, folding the last of the cloth napkins for the rehearsal dinner, I couldn't shake the feeling that something big was coming. The way Jessica had been looking at me all week, like she was working up the courage to say something important. The way David had been extra affectionate, like he was trying to make up for something he hadn't done yet. I had no idea that in less than 24 hours, Jessica would finally find that courage, and my entire world would change forever. The rehearsal dinner went smoothly, held in our backyard under the string lights Tom had helped me hang 5 summers ago. David's groomsmen were loud and cheerful. Jessica's bridesmaids took endless photos, and everyone kept complimenting me on the decorations and food. For a few hours, I almost forgot about the notebook and the overheard conversations. This was what I'd imagined when David first told me he was getting married. Family, celebration, joy. But as the evening wound down and guests started leaving, I noticed Jessica watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. It wasn't hostile, but it wasn't warm either. It was calculating, like she was measuring something, weighing options. David left with his groomsmen for what he called one last night of freedom, and suddenly the house felt very quiet with just Jessica and me. "Margaret," she said as I started clearing dishes from the patio table, "we should talk." Something in her tone made me set down the plates I was holding. This was it. Whatever had been building for months was about to come to the surface. "Of course, dear," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What's on your mind?" Jessica smoothed her hair behind her ear, a gesture I'd learned meant she was nervous. "Let's go inside. This is important." We walked into the kitchen, where I'd spent countless hours cooking for her, baking her favorite cookies, making sure she felt welcomed and loved in my home. The irony of what was about to happen in that space wasn't lost on me, though I didn't know it yet. "Sit down, Margaret," Jessica said. And something about the way she said it, like she was the one in charge, like this was her house and I was the guest, made my stomach clench with anxiety. I sat at my own kitchen table and waited. Jessica took a deep breath like she was preparing for something difficult. "David and I have been talking a lot about our future, about what we want our life to look like after tomorrow." She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "We want to start fresh, build our own family, make our own traditions." I nodded, not sure where this was going, but already not liking the direction. "The thing is, Margaret, we've realized that we need to be honest about something." She was looking directly at me now, and her expression was no longer nervous. It was determined. "This living situation isn't working for us long term. Actually, it's not working for any of us." "What do you mean?" I asked, though part of me already knew. "I mean that David and I are ready to be independent, to live as a married couple without complications." She paused again, and when she continued, her voice was steady and clear. "Honestly, Margaret, if I'm being completely truthful, the greatest gift you could give us for our wedding would be if you disappeared from our family." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt the air leave my lungs, felt my hands start to tremble. "What did you say?" "You heard me," Jessica said, and now her voice was gentler, like she was explaining something to a child. "Look, you've had your time. You raised David. You had your marriage. You've lived your life. This is our time now. David agrees with me, but he's too nice to say it directly." I stared at her, unable to process what I was hearing. Jessica, this is my home. I've lived here for 30 years. I know, and that's exactly the problem, she continued, leaning forward slightly. David and I can't build our life with you hovering around all the time. We need space to be ourselves, to make mistakes, to grow as a couple. And honestly, you need to start thinking about your own future. At your age, maintaining this big house is just going to get harder. My age? I whispered. Margaret, you're 62 years old. Most women your age are embracing their independence, living in communities with people their own age, doing activities they enjoy. Don't you want that? Don't you want to stop worrying about cooking for other people and cleaning up after other people and just focus on yourself for once? The way she said it made it sound like she was offering me a gift, like she was doing me a favor by asking me to abandon the life I'd built. Besides, she continued, this house is way too big for one person. David and I could really use the space, and you could use the freedom. Think about it as a new chapter. At your age, you deserve peace. I sat there in stunned silence, watching this young woman calmly explain why I needed to disappear from my own life. The kitchen around us was filled with evidence of the life I'd built. Photos of David's childhood on the refrigerator, the coffee maker I used every morning to make his favorite blend, the cookie jar I kept filled because Jessica mentioned once that she loved snickerdoodles. We're not asking you to decide tonight, Jessica said, standing up from the table. Just think about it, okay? Maybe do some research on those retirement communities in Florida. I think you'd really like the lifestyle. She paused at the kitchen doorway and turned back to me with what I'm sure she thought was a kind smile. This could be good for all of us, Margaret. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is know when to step aside. And then she left me sitting alone in my kitchen, in my house, wondering how the life I thought I was living had turned out to be so different from reality. I don't remember how long I sat there. Long enough for the ice in my abandoned sweet tea to melt completely. Long enough for the automatic lights in the backyard to turn off, leaving only the dim glow from the kitchen window illuminating the remnants of the rehearsal dinner. When I finally moved, it was to walk through my house like I'd never seen it before. Every room held 30 years of memories, but now I was seeing them through Jessica's eyes. Outdated furniture that needed to be replaced, wasted space that could be better utilized, an old woman taking up room that young people could use more efficiently. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, the bedroom I'd shared with Tom, where we'd whispered about our dreams for David's future, where I'd cried after Tom's diagnosis, where I'd slept alone for 8 years, grateful for the familiar surroundings that kept his memory close. Jessica wanted this room. She'd probably already picked out new paint colors and furniture arrangements. She'd probably been mentally redecorating while sitting at my dinner table, eating food I'd prepared, accepting my financial contributions to her wedding. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the familiar sounds of the house settling around me. Every creak and whisper seemed to be asking the same question. How did I get here? By morning, something inside me had shifted. The shock was wearing off, replaced by something harder and more focused. Jessica wanted me to disappear? Fine. But I was going to disappear on my terms, not hers. The wedding day dawned bright and clear, perfect for an outdoor ceremony. David came home around 8 a.m., clearly hungover from his bachelor party, but trying to hide it. When he saw me making breakfast, he came over and wrapped me in one of his bear hugs. "Morning, Mama," he said, using the name that always made my heart melt. "Thank you for everything, for the dinner last night, for all of this. I know it hasn't been easy having us here, and I just want you to know how grateful I am." I looked into his face. Tom's eyes, my stubborn chin, that sweet smile that had gotten him out of trouble his entire life. And I wanted to ask him if he really wanted me gone, if he really agreed with Jessica that I should disappear. But this was his wedding day, and I wasn't going to be the mother who ruined it with family drama. "I love you, David," I said instead. I hope you'll always remember that. Something in my tone must have caught his attention because he pulled back and studied my face. Mom, are you okay? You seem, I don't know, different this morning. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just a little emotional about my baby getting married. Jessica appeared in the kitchen doorway, already dressed in her silk robe and looking like she'd stepped out of a magazine. Good morning, everyone. Are we ready for the best day ever? She moved around the kitchen like she owned it, making coffee and chatting about the weather and the timeline for photos. She was perfectly normal, perfectly cheerful, like she hadn't spent the previous evening systematically dismantling my life. Margaret, you look tired, she said with what sounded like genuine concern. I hope you're not coming down with something. Big day ahead. I'm fine, I said, marveling at her ability to act like nothing had happened. Just want everything to be perfect for you too. Oh, it will be, Jessica said, smiling brightly. Everything's going to be absolutely perfect. The wedding was beautiful. Jessica was a stunning bride. David looked handsome and happy, and their vows were sweet and sincere. I played my role perfectly. The proud mother of the groom, tears in my eyes, smile on my face, every inch the woman who was thrilled to welcome Jessica into our family. But underneath the performance, my mind was working. As I watched Jessica promise to love and honor my son, I was thinking about the notebook full of renovation plans. As David vowed to put his wife first in all things, I was remembering Jessica's words about me disappearing. As the photographer captured what looked like a perfect family moment, I was planning exactly how I was going to give Jessica what she'd asked for. The reception went late into the evening. There was dancing and laughter and cake cutting and bouquet tossing. Everyone kept telling me what a wonderful job I'd done raising David, what a lucky woman Jessica was to have such a welcoming mother-in-law. If only they knew what Jessica had actually said about that welcoming mother-in-law. As the happy couple prepared to leave for their honeymoon, 2 weeks in Europe funded largely by my wedding gift of $15,000, Jessica hugged me goodbye. Thank you for everything, Margaret, she whispered in my ear. We'll talk more when we get back, okay? About everything we discussed. David's goodbye was longer and more emotional. Take care of yourself while we're gone, Mama. I love you so much. I love you too, David, I said, memorizing the feel of his arms around me. Have a wonderful time. You both deserve all the happiness in the world. And I meant it. Despite everything, I wanted David to be happy. I just wasn't going to sacrifice my own happiness to make it possible anymore. As their car disappeared down the street, heading for the airport, I stood in my driveway and looked at my house. For the first time in 2 years, it was going to be just mine again. And I was going to use that time wisely. Jessica had asked me to disappear. She was about to learn that when you ask someone to vanish from your life, you should be very careful about how they choose to do it. The first thing I did after David and Jessica left for their honeymoon was call my attorney, Robert Chen. I'd worked with him when Tom passed away, and I trusted him completely. Monday morning, I was sitting in his office with a cup of coffee and a legal pad full of questions. Margaret, he said, reviewing the property documents I'd brought, you need to understand something very clearly. This house, all your financial accounts, your investments, everything is in your name alone. You have no legal obligation to provide housing for your adult son or his wife. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I didn't even realize I'd been carrying. So, if I wanted them to leave, you could give them 30 days' notice, just like any landlord. Though given the circumstances, I'd recommend being more generous with the timeline. He leaned back in his chair. Margaret, may I ask what's prompted this conversation? Last time we spoke, you seemed happy to have David living with you. I told him about Jessica's request for me to disappear and about the notebook I'd found. Robert's expression grew more serious as I talked. I see, he said when I finished. And you're certain about what you overheard and what you saw in this notebook? Completely certain. Then I think we need to take some protective steps, not just for your property, but for your financial security. He pulled out a fresh legal pad. "Let's talk about what you want your future to look like." By the end of that meeting, I had a clear plan. More importantly, I had something I'd been missing for months: control over my own life. The next day, I drove to Jessica's workplace. I knew she'd left her laptop at home. She'd mentioned being frustrated about forgetting it, and I had some questions that needed answers. Her coworker, a friendly girl named Brittany, was happy to help when I explained I was Jessica's future mother-in-law. "Oh, Jessica talks about you all the time," Brittany said, though something in her expression suggested those conversations hadn't been entirely positive. "She's so excited about starting her new life after the honeymoon." "Yes, she mentioned they have some big plans," I said carefully. "I hope I'm not overstepping, but I wanted to ask you about something. Jessica's been talking about making some changes to our living situation, and I want to make sure I understand her perspective correctly." Brittany's smile faltered slightly. "Oh, well, she has mentioned feeling a bit constrained by the current arrangement. She's talked about wanting more independence as a married couple." "Did she ever mention anything specific about the house we all live in?" Brittany looked uncomfortable now. "I probably shouldn't. It's not really my place to—" "Please," I said gently. "I just want to understand." "Well," Brittany said, lowering her voice, "she did say something about how the house was too big for just one person and how it seemed wasteful for you to be rattling around in all that space when they could really use it to start their family. But she also said she was trying to find a way to bring it up that wouldn't hurt your feelings." I thanked Brittany and left, my suspicions confirmed. This wasn't a recent decision or a moment of wedding stress. Jessica had been planning this for months, maybe longer. That afternoon, I called Linda Williams, a private investigator that Robert had recommended. "I need to know who I'm really dealing with," I told her. "Smart move," Linda said. "You'd be surprised how often family disputes involve people who aren't who they seem to be." While Linda worked on Jessica's background, I started my own investigation. I spent the week going through every inch of Jessica's belongings that she'd left behind. What I found was more disturbing than I'd expected. Hidden in the back of her closet was a folder labeled Future Plans, not the notebook I'd already seen, but something much more comprehensive. This folder contained printed emails between Jessica and David, real estate listings for comparable houses in our neighborhood, and most shocking of all, a timeline titled Operation Independence. Phase 1 was labeled Build Trust and Establish Residency, completed 2 years ago when they moved in. Phase 2 was Secure Financial Commitment. This included getting me to pay for the wedding and what Jessica called establishing dependency patterns. Phase 3 was Create Motivation for Change, which apparently meant making me uncomfortable enough to want to leave on my own. But it was Phase 4 that made my blood run cold. Facilitate Transition. This phase included researching power of attorney documents, investigating elder care options, and something called Property Transfer Optimization. At the bottom of the timeline, in Jessica's neat handwriting, was a note. Target completion, 6 months post-wedding. Ideal outcome. M relocates voluntarily to FL Retirement Community, house transfer completed through estate planning update. I sat on Jessica's bed, holding proof that my son's wife had been systematically planning to manipulate me out of my own home, and I felt something inside me harden into resolve. Linda called me 3 days later with her findings. "Margaret, you need to hear this. Jessica Martinez has been engaged 3 times before David." 3 times? The first engagement ended when her fiancé's family discovered she'd been forging his signature on loan applications. The second ended in a lawsuit. She convinced the guy to put her name on his condo, then tried to force a sale when they broke up. The third engagement lasted 6 months, ended when the man's elderly mother died and left everything to her son. Apparently, Jessica had been very interested in that inheritance. My hands were shaking as I wrote down the details. What about her finances? That's where it gets really interesting. Jessica has $78,000 in debt across multiple credit cards and student loans. Her credit score is 520, which is terrible. She's been living paycheck to paycheck for years, despite the decent income from her job. And David, your son's credit score is 580, which is poor but not catastrophic. Most of his debt seems recent, the past 2 years. Car loan, credit cards, some personal loans. Combined, they have about $95,000 in debt and a monthly expense load of around $4,200. After Linda's call, I sat in my living room and did the math. David and Jessica together brought home about $5,250 a month after taxes. With their debt payments and living expenses, they had maybe $1,000 left over each month, if they were lucky. Without my house, without my financial support, they couldn't afford anything close to the lifestyle they'd been living. No wonder Jessica wanted me gone, but wanted to keep the house. They needed my assets, but they didn't want me around to control them. That night, I called my financial advisor, Patricia Gonzalez, and scheduled an emergency meeting. I need to protect my assets, I told her, and I need to do it quickly. Patricia had been managing my investments since Tom died, and she knew my situation well. When I explained what was happening, she was immediately concerned. Margaret, what you're describing sounds like financial elder abuse. It's more common than people think, and it often involves family members. She pulled up my accounts on her computer. Let's make sure everything is secure. We spent 2 hours going through every account, every investment, every asset. Patricia helped me establish new accounts at a different bank, with paperwork sent to a P.O. box that only I controlled. We moved a significant portion of my liquid assets to these protected accounts, set up automatic transfers for my monthly expenses, and created what she called firewall protection around my retirement funds. If anyone tries to access these accounts or change beneficiaries, you'll be notified immediately, she explained. And we've set up the new accounts so that they can't be discovered through normal credit checks or asset searches. By Friday, exactly 1 week after David and Jessica left for Europe, I had a complete picture of my situation and a plan for what came next. But first, I wanted to see exactly how deep this betrayal went. Jessica had left her laptop in the house, probably figuring it was safe since I was just the mother-in-law. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I felt justified under the circumstances. I opened her laptop. What I found there made everything else look innocent by comparison. There were dozens of emails between Jessica and David, going back over a year discussing the Margaret situation. David hadn't just agreed to Jessica's plan, he'd been an active participant in developing it. One email from David, sent 6 months ago, read, "You're right about Mom needing a push. She's too comfortable with the current situation. Maybe if we start talking about starting our own family more, she'll realize she's in the way." Jessica's response, "I've been researching retirement communities in Florida. Some of them are really nice, and the cost would be way less than what she spends maintaining this house. If we present it right, we can make her think it's her idea." Another exchange from 3 months ago was even worse. David, "I feel bad about this sometimes. She's done so much for us." Jessica, "David, we've talked about this. Your mom has had her life. She raised you, she was married, she got to live her dreams. Now it's our turn. We can't build our future while we're stuck in her past." David, "I know you're right. It's just hard." Jessica, "It'll be harder if we wait until she's too old to make the transition. This way she can still enjoy her retirement years. And honestly, we're doing her a favor. She just doesn't see it yet." I kept reading, feeling sicker with each email. They'd discussed everything. How to make me feel like a burden, how to gradually take over more of the household decisions, how to get me to update my will for tax purposes. There was even a discussion about Jessica befriending other elderly women in the neighborhood to get ideas about successful transitions to retirement living. The final email exchange was from the week before the wedding. Jessica, "I'm going to talk to her after the rehearsal dinner. It's time." David, Are you sure? What if she gets upset and makes a scene at the wedding? Jessica, she won't. She loves you too much to ruin your wedding day. And honestly, David, if we don't do this now, we'll be stuck living with your mother for years. Do you want to start our marriage in her house, under her rules? David, no, you're right. It's time we had our own life. Jessica, trust me. I know how to handle this. I closed the laptop and sat in the silence of my house, finally understanding the full scope of what had been happening to me. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment comment from Jessica. This wasn't even just Jessica's idea. My own son had been plotting to get rid of me for over a year, but they'd made one critical mistake in all their planning. They'd assumed I was a helpless old woman who would quietly accept whatever they decided was best for me. They'd assumed I would be grateful for their concern about my future and go along with their suggestions. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. Monday morning, I called Thompson & Associates, the premier real estate agency in our area. I'd like to list my house for immediate sale, I told the agent, Sarah Mitchell. Wonderful. When are you hoping to move? As soon as possible. I'm relocating to Florida. Sarah came by that afternoon to do a market analysis. The house was in excellent condition, the neighborhood was desirable, and the market was strong. I think we can list this at $479,000 and expect to move it quickly, she said. Probably within 2 weeks, given the demand in this area. Perfect. Let's do it. I do want to mention, Mrs. Thompson, that you'll want to give any current occupants appropriate notice. Do you have tenants? In a manner of speaking, I said. Don't worry, they'll be properly notified. That evening, I called my old friend Helen, who'd moved to a retirement community in Sarasota 3 years ago. Helen, I need to ask you about Del Webb. Are you happy there? Margaret, oh my goodness, are you thinking of making the move? I've been telling you for years that you'd love it here. We talked for an hour about her community, the activities, the independence, the peace of mind that came with not having to maintain a house. By the end of the conversation, I was genuinely excited about the possibility. There's a 2-bedroom condo coming available next month, Helen said. The woman who lives there is moving to be closer to her grandchildren. It's beautiful, overlooks the golf course, and the HOA fee covers everything. Maintenance, lawn care, even cable and internet. How much? She's asking $285,000, which is reasonable for the location and condition. Margaret, you should seriously consider it. You'd love the lifestyle here, and you'd be close enough to visit your son, but far enough away to have your own life. That night, I called the woman with the condo and put down a deposit, contingent on the sale of my house. Then I spent several hours researching moving companies and storage facilities. By Tuesday, I had a complete exit strategy. The house would sell quickly, giving me enough money to buy the condo outright and have substantial funds left over for living expenses. I'd found a moving company that specialized in long-distance relocations and could handle everything within a week's notice. But most importantly, I'd found something I'd lost somewhere along the way: excitement about my future. For the first time in months, I was making plans that were about what I wanted, not what someone else thought was best for me. David and Jessica were due back on Wednesday. I'd calculated the timing perfectly. They'd return to find their future plans dramatically altered, but they'd have no legal recourse and no way to stop what was already in motion. Wednesday afternoon, I heard their car pull into the driveway. I was sitting in the living room, surrounded by legal documents, real estate paperwork, and printed emails from Jessica's laptop. Everything was organized in neat stacks on the coffee table, like evidence in a trial. "Mom, we're back," David called as they came through the front door. "Hope you missed us." "Welcome home," I called back. "Please come into the living room, both of you. We need to talk." I heard Jessica's laughter from the hallway. "Uh-oh, David. Sounds like Mom's been thinking while we were gone." They walked into the living room carrying suitcases and shopping bags from their European honeymoon, both of them tanned and relaxed and happy. When they saw me sitting there with my stacks of papers, their expressions changed immediately. "Mom," David said slowly, "what's all this?" "Sit down, please," I said calmly. Both of you." Jessica set down her bags and perched on the edge of the couch, suddenly alert. David remained standing, looking confused and slightly worried. "Jessica," I began, "I've been thinking a lot about our conversation before the wedding, about me disappearing from your family." Jessica's face went pale. David looked between us, clearly trying to catch up. "What conversation?" David asked. I picked up the first stack of papers. "The conversation where your wife told me that the greatest wedding gift I could give you both would be if I disappeared from your family." I looked directly at David. "The conversation you knew all about, because you've been planning this for over a year." David's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "I have emails, David, dozens of them, between you and Jessica, discussing the Margaret situation and how to get me to move out of my own house." I set the emails on the coffee table. "Would you like me to read some of them out loud?" "Mom, I can explain," David started. "No need," I interrupted. "I understand perfectly. You both want me gone. You want this house. You want to start your life without me in it." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the yard where Tom and I had hosted David's birthday parties for 29 years. "Here's the thing," I continued, turning back to face them. "I've decided you're absolutely right." Jessica and David exchanged glances. "I should disappear from your family. I should start fresh, live independently, stop being a burden on your future plans." I picked up the real estate contract from the coffee table. "So I've decided to grant your wish." "What is that?" Jessica asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's a sales contract for this house. We close next Friday." I set the contract down where they could see it. "You wanted me to disappear? Congratulations. I'm disappearing." David stood up abruptly. "Mom, what are you talking about? You can't sell the house." "Actually, I can. It's my house, David. My name on the deed, my name on the mortgage that's been paid off for 5 years, my name on the tax records. I can do whatever I want with it." "But where will we live?" Jessica's voice was rising in panic. "That's not my problem anymore." I walked back to my chair and sat down. "You're both adults with good jobs and your whole lives ahead of you. I'm sure you'll figure something out." "Mom, please," David said, and I could hear the little boy in his voice. "We can work this out. Maybe we were wrong to—" "David," I said quietly, "do you remember when you were 8 years old and you broke Mrs. Henderson's window with your baseball?" He nodded, confused by the change of subject. "And do you remember what your father and I taught you? That when you make a choice, you have to live with the consequences?" "Yes, but—" "You chose to treat me like an obstacle to your happiness. You chose to plot behind my back to get me out of my own home. You chose to let your wife tell me I should disappear from your family." I stood up again, and this time my voice was stronger, more certain. "Those were your choices, David. These are the consequences." Jessica was crying now, but they weren't sad tears. They were angry, frustrated tears. "You can't do this. We have rights. We've been living here for 2 years." "As my guests," I said calmly, "guests who've outstayed their welcome." I walked to the front door and opened it. "You have until Friday to find somewhere else to live. I'll be staying at the Hampton Inn until the closing, and then I'm moving to Florida." "Florida?" David's voice cracked. "Yes, I found a lovely retirement community in Sarasota. You know, the kind of place you thought would be perfect for me?" I smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. "Turns out you were right. I'm going to love it there." "Mom, please," David said, and now he was crying too. "Don't do this. We're family." "Family," I repeated thoughtfully. "Yes, I used to think we were. But family members don't plot to manipulate each other out of their homes. Family members don't call each other obstacles. Family members don't tell each other to disappear." I held the door open wider. "You wanted independence? You've got it, both of you." Jessica stood up, her face red with anger and tears. "This is ridiculous. David, tell her she can't do this." "I can't," David whispered. "It's her house." "But we saved, we counted on—" Jessica's words tumbled over each other as the reality of the situation hit her. "You counted on my generosity," I said. "You counted on my love for David making me accept whatever you decided was best. You counted on me being too weak or too polite to stand up for myself." I paused. "You counted wrong." As they gathered their suitcases and walked toward the door, David turned back one more time. "Mom, I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far." "I know you didn't, sweetheart," I said, and for a moment my voice was gentle again. "But it did go this far, and now we all have to live with it." 6 months later, I was sitting on my balcony in Sarasota, watching the sunset over the golf course and talking to my new friend Carol about our plans for tomorrow's book club meeting. My phone rang, and I saw David's name on the screen. "Hi, David," I said. "Mom." His voice was tired, older somehow. "How are you?" "I'm good, sweetheart, really good. How are you and Jessica?" There was a long pause. We're having some problems. Money's really tight. We're living in a studio apartment, and Jessica's she's not handling the stress very well." I waited, watching a pelican dive into the water below my balcony. "Mom, I was wrong about everything. I see that now." His voice broke slightly. "Jessica's been different since we moved out. She blames me for losing the house, says I should have fought harder to keep it. She's talking about maybe taking a break from our marriage." "I'm sorry to hear that, David." "Are you, though?" he asked quietly. "Are you really sorry?" I considered the question honestly. "I'm sorry that you're hurting. I'm sorry that your marriage is struggling, but I'm not sorry that I stood up for myself. I know, I get that now. I miss you, Mom. I miss having you in my life." "I miss you too," I said, and I meant it. "But David, trust takes time to rebuild. You and Jessica didn't just ask me to move out. You spent months planning to manipulate me, to make me think it was my idea, to get control of my assets. That's not something I can just forget. I know, and I'm not asking you to forget. I'm just asking, is there any way we can try to fix this? I've learned my lesson, Mom, I promise." I watched the sun sink lower toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "David, do you remember what I used to tell you when you were little and you'd make a mistake?" "That I had to earn back trust?" "That's right. Trust isn't given, it's earned, and it's earned through actions, not words." "What would I have to do?" "I don't know yet," I said honestly, "but the fact that you're asking is a start." After we hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness and thought about forgiveness and consequences and second chances. I thought about the woman I'd been 6 months ago, always giving, always accommodating, always putting other people's needs before my own. That woman was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone who knew her own worth, someone who wouldn't disappear just because other people found her inconvenient. My phone buzzed with a text from Helen. "Wine night at Marina's tomorrow? She's making those amazing appetizers again." No, I smiled and typed back, "Wouldn't miss it. Life is good here." And it was. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I was living a life that was entirely my own. I had friends who chose to spend time with me because they enjoyed my company, not because they needed something from me. I had activities that I picked because they interested me, not because they accommodated someone else's schedule. Most importantly, I had peace, the kind of peace that comes from knowing you don't have to make yourself smaller to make other people comfortable. Jessica had asked me to disappear from their family. Instead, I disappeared into the life I was meant to be living all along. And if David wanted to be part of that life again someday, he was going to have to prove that he'd learned what family really means. Until then, I was perfectly content to keep living, thriving, and enjoying every single day of my beautiful, independent life. They'd wanted me to disappear. Mission accomplished. But the joke was on them. I'd never been happier to be gone.